My name is Kelly Simon, and I've taken bits and pieces from other learning theories to make my own. My thoughts and beliefs are influenced by my experiences as an elementary educator. For 8 years, I taught fifth grade science, which covered a variety of topics in physical, earth, and life science. My classes consisted of a mix of students with ADD, emotional disturbances, learning disabilities, dyslexia, gifted students, native English speakers, English language learners, and students from different socioeconomic backgrounds. In other words, the needs of the students varied, and it was my job to make sure that I taught each one in a way that ensured they were learning. Knowing my background is important when reviewing my personal learning theory, as that is what it's based on. First, let's talk about how people learn. I believe that people learn by observing or experiencing something and then reflecting on what happened. My beliefs on how people learn are similar to what is explained in cognitive information processing theory, which states that the inputs from our environment that we pay attention to are the inputs that go from sensory to working memory. Then that information must make a connection to something already stored in the brain in order for it to stay in working memory. In other words, even though we encounter a myriad of stimuli every day, we can't remember all of it. The things that stick with us are the things that we paid attention to, and the things we remember well or learn are the things that we connected to our prior knowledge. In order to get the information into long term memory, the learner must engage with the material in a meaningful way. The learner has to perform higher order thinking, applying the information to a new situation, doing analysis, evaluating a claim, or creating original products. This kind of engagement can also involve connecting the new information to the learner's schema, which is prior knowledge on the topic. The new information gets incorporated into the learner schema, which then changes the organization of the file directories in the brain. Now let's discuss how people learn best. Describing learning can be very simple and straightforward, similar to what's already been presented. Information comes in, gets stored in the brain, and ta-da! We have learned. However, we all know that it's not that simple. So what makes learning so complicated? I believe that the affective or emotional factors play a huge role in learning. Emotions about ourselves and our abilities have a great impact on our motivation to do the work necessary for learning. If attending to information is required for it to go to working memory, then instructors are challenged with the task of making sure learners are paying attention to the information. I believe that there are multiple reasons why a student may not pay attention to the information. Sometimes students need a reason for learning other than because you're supposed to, or so you can get a good grade. Students learn best when they know exactly what's expected of them, when the information is interesting and relevant to their lives, and when they can see a benefit in learning it. Instructors can work to make their content interesting and exciting, but I think the most important thing educators can do is to build their students' self efficacy and create a structure in the classroom that is inherently motivating. People learn best when they feel safe, physically and emotionally, and part of that emotional safeness is feeling like they will be successful or knowing that it is okay if they aren't. Feeling like success is likely happens when a person has high self efficacy. When a person has low self efficacy, it can be an impediment to learning. Thoughts like, I'm stupid, I'll never understand this, or I failed yesterday, I'm going to fail today, are quite demotivating. I've seen kids actively not pay attention, and it always baffled me. I'd be thinking, hey kid, you're the furthest behind. You should be paying the most attention. Now I know they probably had low self efficacy. They don't believe that they are capable, so they just give up before trying. Where does this attitude come from? According to Bandura, self efficacy is developed through four pathways. Unfortunately, many of the poor performing students who, in my eyes, were sabotaging themselves had failed over and over again in previous grades. They saw their classmates answering questions faster and getting better grades than them. They may have heard negative comments about their abilities from parents, teachers, or peers, or they may have received fake praise or praise for what they knew were very simple tasks. And over time, that probably led to gut feelings of their inability to learn. Designing perfect lessons was only slightly beneficial for these students if they chose not to participate in the lessons. Therefore, it is the teacher's role to help kids increase their self efficacy. Connecting this to Keller's theory on motivation, a student's motivation to keep doing the work of learning is tied to what they attribute their performance to. Attributions can be internal or external, stable or unstable, and controllable or uncontrollable. Only when self efficacy is high and attributions are internal, stable, and controllable will students perform at their highest potential. People learn best when they feel like they actually can learn. How does my theory address learning in various settings? Although my theory of learning is based on my experiences with fifth graders, I believe that these principles are universal. I believe that teenagers as well as adults need to attend to information and connect it with their prior knowledge. They also need to be motivated to learn. I believe that adults and teenagers are probably better at motivating themselves and regulating their emotions than fifth graders, but motivation and self efficacy are also needed for optimal learning in older people. So, now for the fun part. When learning about learning theories, my biggest question is always, so how do I implement this in real life? You will see that there is some overlap between lesson design, self efficacy, and motivation when it comes to implementation. Let's look at an example lesson that uses my theory of learning as its foundation. The lesson objective is for students to be able to estimate the time based on the sun's position in the sky. The lesson starts with the teacher posing the question, have you ever noticed that your shadow doesn't look the same all the time? Why do you think that happens? This is the attention getting and relevance making phase. In Keller's ARCS model of motivation, grabbing attention is the first thing that needs to take place, and then students need to feel like the information they are going to learn is relevant to their lives. In fifth grade science, most topics are related to our everyday lives in some way. I found that asking, I wonder why, kind of questions taps into students' curious nature and makes them want to know the answer. During this phase, students are encouraged to share what they think, and the teacher does not comment on whether their thoughts are correct or not. In addition to being motivating, attention is needed for processing to happen, according to cognitive information processing theory. If students are not paying attention, then the information, no matter how wonderful and expertly crafted, will not make it to working memory in their brains. The next step in this lesson is to take the students outside and ask them to observe their own and each other's shadows when facing different directions and standing in different positions. Have the students draw or take pictures of their shadows and write any more questions they might have about shadows in their journals. Not only does this make them really want to know the answers, but it's also activating their schema. Whatever they already know about the sun and shadows is being brought to the front of their minds, so when they start learning the answers to the I wonder questions, they will easily be able to connect it to their prior knowledge. Now the task is to get it from working memory to long-term memory, and that is accomplished by using a variety of learning activities that force the learner to interact with the material multiple times and in a meaningful way. In this example, that could include things like making a sundial, going outside at different times of the day and observing and recording the sun and shadow positions, labeling the four walls of the classroom with north, south, east, and west, turning the lights off, and then using a flashlight, have the students act out sunrise and sunset where the shadows would be at different points in the sun's journey across the sky. Because assessment tends to be multiple choice, it is important to include learning activities with multiple choice questions. According to CIP, retrieval of information is easier when it is in the same context as when the information was learned. To borrow from Skinner's behaviorism theory, I think that fading is a good way to increase motivation and self-efficacy. Fading is when support is provided to a learner and then it is slowly taken away as they demonstrate that they no longer need it. A set of diagrams showing the sun at different positions and the shadows created and the corresponding times can be given to students to use while they do their learning activities. Then, challenge them to answer a set of questions without the diagrams. If they are successful without them, they no longer need them. If they are not successful without them, then they know that they can try again using the diagrams and continue that process until they no longer need them. For kids with low self-efficacy, this is incredibly comforting. They know that they have support and that it is up to them to decide when they no longer need it. If they are not successful, they know that it's no big deal. They just have to keep practicing. This also ties to the C in the ARCS model, which stands for confidence. Confidence is built when learners know what's expected of them and when the work is just the right amount of challenging. Another aspect of this lesson is that it is part of a larger unit on the sun's interaction with the earth. This is the teak. It is imperative that instructors break large learning objectives into smaller chunks. In this lesson, we focus solely on the sequences and patterns of shadows. The students think that they are only learning how to tell time, but really they are learning the patterns and using them to make predictions. Chunking is part of CIP as well, as a suggestion from Bandura, to increase self-efficacy. Now to address the emotional factors. Even before the I wonder question, students should be given a chance to set a goal for themselves as to what grade they want to make on the final assessment. I also make a class-wide goal for an average grade, and if that goal is met, I reward the students with food. I like using a bar graph as a visual. For example, if a student wants to make a 90, they would draw a line where 90 is, and on all of their assignments related to that unit, they would record their grade, and if their bar is below 90, they know that they need to redo the assignment or work harder on the next one. Many times, the bars will slowly get higher and higher, which is extremely motivating and builds self-efficacy. It helps students see that they may receive a low score in the beginning, but if they keep working at it, they will progress and eventually reach their goal. This is key to building a growth mindset and developing internal, stable, controllable attributions about their performance. They know that their success is based on their own hard work. Seeing their progress and reaching their goals gives them satisfaction, which is the last part of the ARCS model. I think my students have had quite a bit of success in my classroom using this framework. The strengths of my theory are that it combines effective teaching with the emotional aspect. You can have a teacher that is very inspiring and uplifting, but her lessons are not designed well. Then you can have a teacher that has very well designed lessons, but may be sucking the life out of her students by not acknowledging their emotional needs. With this learning theory, both parts of the student are being addressed, which is good because both parts feed off each other. The student's self-efficacy is built when they see that they've been successful in the past. That student will then be more motivated to learn the next topic, which will result in more learning. It's a positive feedback loop. The weaknesses and limitations of my model are that the aspects intended to increase motivation and self-efficacy require more time than most teachers are willing or allowed to spend on extra or non-instructional things. Also, the process of piquing interest, exploring the topic, and then moving to multiple choice questions takes a lot of time. For example, this lesson is allotted 2 to 3 days in my district scope and sequence. In that case, all you can do is present the information and do practice questions. Within the time constraints of public education, my learning model may be difficult to implement. In conclusion, I've created a personal theory of learning using components from cognitive information processing theory, schema theory, behaviorism, social learning theory, and motivation theory. Ultimately, my theory comes from my belief that people learn best when they feel safe. Safe from physical harm, from ridicule from others, and from disappointment when they fail. My model includes ways to make instruction interesting and engaging enough to make students want to learn. It includes learning activities that make the information stick and is aligned with assessment, and includes aspects that increase self-efficacy and motivation. Thank you for watching.